I just think it is plausible that we walk away from this podcast understanding that it's a small number of training concepts that could have the biggest impact on a player's success. Welcome to the Rhythm Dribble Development Podcast. I'm your host, Daryl Adams. In today's episode, we'll uncover how optimizing basketball training is very necessary if the goal is going to be to evolve a player to success in basketball. The trick is this, that fundamentals are the key. They're the gold standard in terms of understanding higher level coaches' thoughts regarding how they prioritize the characteristics of players. I think the mission here, you guys, has always been clear, is that it's my job to empower basketball players to reach their fullest potential. Despite the many challenges that exist, I'd like to see more players reach their fullest potential. I do touch quite a few players within the gym, but this video exposure allows for me to reach a little bit further. I tend to focus on high school as a destination, as that first milestone for players. And it's simply because that's the first time where the circle of successful basketball players starts to get really small. And that has an impact on the people that have been doing it all their lives. Either this is the first time that they'll have to face the issue of whether they're good enough in order to continue on. I also think that high school is that time where you see a little bit less of parents being involved. And that's important because basketball players that are moving on to college, they have to take on this more independent role in terms of arriving there. So all in all, I think that while it's a tough road to becoming a quality high school basketball player, I just think that it's achievable. I believe that the things that make basketball players is a series of doable kinds of things. And with that in mind, I believe everybody has a chance at it. Before we dive in, I'd like to make sure everybody likes and subscribes the podcast. It's because of your support that I'll keep going with this. I know that if you press subscribe, then you'll be the first to know when there's more enriching conversations as we go forward. Other than that, let's get started. I think in business, it's often observed that approximately 80% of a company's sales comes from only 20% of its customers. Or in nature, think of this, 80% of the fruit comes from only 20% of the plant. In management, 80% of a project's progression is achieved with only 20% of the people. In my world, and my wife would laugh at this, 20% of my clothes are worn 80% of the time. In books in school, 80% of the important information is found in only 20% of the pages. This theory as a whole was created by Vilfredo Pareto, a European economist in the 19th and 20th centuries. He noticed that approximately 80% of the land and wealth in Italy was actually owned by only 20% of the population. He evolved this theory into what we know now as the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule, and it can actually explain productivity or the lack of productivity of today. The rule itself, it's not perfect. So it doesn't explain all cases. But in theory, it can have a profound effect on basketball development. By applying the notion that 80% of the desired results are found in only 20% of the development activities, actually for us, that's drills, right? That players are seeking to get better and they're seeking to streamline the process. And the majority of what they're doing might be the wrong things. Remember, 80% of the results in this basketball development thing may be derived from just 20% of the drill work. To me, you guys, it's clear. Those 20% of the drills, they are the fundamentals. Take a listen to a video. Actually, the author was Better Than Yesterday channel. I bumped into it doing some research for the podcast. The URL is in the description below. But take a second out because he's able to explain this same type of deal.
The Pareto principle, aka the 80-20 rule. It can be applied to almost any area of your life, whether it's business or free time. If you can identify the 20% that produces the greatest outcome, you can spend more time doing that to create an even greater payoff. It also helps you cut back on the 80% of things that waste your time, which create only 20% of the results. It encourages you to think efficiently and focus on what is actually important. So think about what are some things that you could double down on and which ones you should eliminate.
I'll repeat it again. 80-20 rule implies that 20% of the activities or tasks that you engage in often yield 80% of the desired results. With that in mind, many of the things that we engage in actually have just a minimal effect or contribution on the actual effect. I just hope that you understand this because it matters. The question becomes, is it risky that sometimes trainees focus on the wrong things when trying to develop in basketball? Consider this. The 80-20 rule serves as a reminder to focus on the few vital factors. What factors? These are the factors that will generate the most impact. Remember, we have hopeful basketball players. We can't engage everything. We have to choose the things that are important that's going to have the most profound effects. The 80-20 rule, again, is not perfect. It's not an exact ratio of 80 to 20. And it may not hold true in every situation, but it can help this. It can help players and families and trainers who have an interest in prioritizing their efforts to get the most out of their development. With that said, it's my job to encourage athletes and families and trainers to somehow identify what are these 20% of the skills, 20% of the skills that would lead to 80% of the improvement. And I think at the end of the day, that these might be the boring ones because that's just the way it is. But I think it's the extreme repetition around these things, this 20%, these boring fundamental things, that I think are going to make the difference. The other things don't quite matter as much, and they'll round out as the fundamentals improve. But in a perfect world, because we've accessed the fundamentals, now young, emerging, or evolving basketball players will have more choices in terms of their skills, in terms of what skills or what tendencies they'll choose, and then their creativity will be allowed to take over. And that may be what's missing in the game today. It's just players don't seem to have the creativity personally. Everyone's doing the same things. While the other things will matter to your friends, they won't matter to the very coaches that you want to take notice of you. And those coaches which you rely on to give you a chance to be productive on court. My son showed me an ESPN video of the legendary Coach K a few weeks back. From the Blue Devils, we know Coach K. He retired back in, I think it was 2022. He's the all-time winningest coach in Division I basketball, college basketball, with 1,129 games. He also won 5 national championships. And in the video, he was addressing his team at the beginning of one of the upcoming seasons about their offensive approach. So he said, this year, we're going to run a 5-out. And in order to be successful, you're going to have to be able to do these kinds of things within this 5-out. And I think, as an aside, I think your young coaches or your child's coaches ought to be able to have this clear conversation with kids as well. Coach K identified this. He said that they'll use a 5-out offensive system, and the priority in the 5-out is quality spacing. It's a huge priority. And then he continued on. He said the way you legitimize spacing is that the players be able to shoot the basketball. And I really mean really be able to shoot the basketball. It will make the offense harder to defend. I think I ought to repeat this again. He told those players that you guys are going to have to be able to shoot the standstill jump shot. And I thought with that statement, he put every player on the team on an equal playing field. Now, some of the players will take that information and hear exactly what was said, and as a result, they'll go straight to the gym and begin to work on their standstill jump shot, comply with the request. I think some will hear it a little bit more passively, and they'll understand that, well, I have a lot of other things to do in my life, both regarding the game and not considering the game. But here's the issue, is that some players won't even hear Coach K's message at all. Coach K went a little bit further, and he gave them an example of an interaction he once had with Kobe Bryant when he was coaching him over at the Olympics. He gave him some advice back then. He said, you have to be able to shoot the standstill jump shot playing over here in the Olympics with all of these superstars. Kobe responded to him that he never gets standstill jump shots. And what he was basically saying is that he's always double teamed, right? So he never gets that chance. And Coach K reminded him that because of the other superstars on the court, you will certainly receive standstill jump shots. He continued on. The game started that year, and Kobe was getting standstill jump shots. And unfortunately, Kobe was missing them. Coach K went on to say that as a result, Kobe stayed after practice every day and shot 1,000 shots in order to fix it. And he had to emphasize it was no exaggeration. The next thing he said is why I told this story. I feel like he was talking directly to his team and you and your families. He said, I know you guys are working on all this stuff, right? Talked about this, suggested that everything that they see on TV or everything that their trainer tells them or everything that they get advice about, they're working on all this stuff. He said, but the standstill three and the free throw shots, you have to be able to make them. I thought it was a compelling message to me because he's saying keep the main thing the main thing. The URL is in the description below. Here's the video. I'll let you guys take a look at it.
The thing about space is that in order for it to be validated, you have to be able to hit a shot. That's why the standstill three-point shot is a shot that everyone on this team has to be able to hit. You know, when I coached the U.S. team, I talked to them about hitting standstill threes. Kobe Bryant said, "Coach, I never get a standstill three." I said, "You will get standstill threes." He said, "I'm always double teamed." You won't be double teamed because LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony, those guys will be out on the court. You're going to get open threes. And then all of a sudden he did, and he didn't hit them. And then he said every night shooting 1,000 shots a night, and that's not an exaggeration. You know, and you guys say, "Well, holy mackerel, I'm working on all this stuff." Cool, work on all that stuff. The free throw and the standstill three, you got to be able to hit. You should love this place right here.
That is the 80-20 rule. I tell people all the time, focus on the key drills that provide the most benefit. Identify the 20% of the drills, according to Pareto, that contribute the most to players' mastery of basketball and stay focused on them. I've been successful at this because I'm a maniac in trying to optimize training time and put simple tools into players' toolboxes. When I was a young guy, Street and Smith was my thing. It was a place to go to read all about standout basketball players and what makes them special, whether it's offensively and or defensively. As time went on for me, Street and Smith was kind of replaced, but not until I had two kids, both my nephew at the University of Cincinnati and my son at St. Bonaventure University. They were both featured in there for their respective conferences. But Street and Smith was replaced by a guy, John Rothstein. He talks about his College Hoops podcast. And I started to listen to that, and I had the same feeling I used to have over at Street and Smith's back some years ago. And on the podcast, he interviews college coaches about what's going on with them and their teams. It kind of serves for me as this great window into the mind of some of the best coaches. So I listen pretty attentively. The reality is they tell you what makes their players, what makes their scheme, why they like it so much, what they're trying to get out of it. And then we can take that information, that becomes valuable information. They even give us their thoughts and key moments associated with the games. Remember, coaches are the best minds in the college game. Many of them are from high school, or they have relationships with high school coaches, or they do workshops where high school coaches come and gather some of this information and learn some of the theories from them. I've always taken the information and merely reverse engineered it to create the training priorities. So my 20% of the non-negotiable skills are based on what successful college coaches and pro guards, it's what they prioritize. I just merely try to create an alignment between what they're expecting from players and what I should focus on in terms of preparing them. I think at the end of the day, I wish more young people would listen to them. They'll tell you how to prepare. They'll tell you how to win, how to lose, how to react, how to respect the history of the game. One time they interviewed, John Rothstein interviewed the coach from the University of Houston, Kevin Sampson. And he talked about his players and his schemes like they all do. During the interview, he said that when he walks into practice every day, he asks the question, how are we going to win? To me, this is a real opportunity for his players and all the players who are trying to become collegiate. Because what he's asking players is what all coaches mean to ask players. And that's, how can you be a part of our overall solution? Because coaches need solutions. You can't spend all the time perfecting the fancy Euro step when you should be focusing your attention on how to execute 30 and 40 and 50 mid-range or three-point shots in a row. Or how you become a master at all 5 spots. At a scheme level, Coach Sampson, he talked about his team. I remember him talking about hunting inside-out scoring opportunities, which is big in the modern game. It's the very thing that prevents the selfishness or the bad shots that have become pervasive in the game of basketball. He talked about guarding multiple sets with multiple efforts. He was also asked to describe a newcomer that would make a major impact on his team. He said the name, I don't remember the name, but I remember the description. And these become priorities. He talked about that he can score it. 2, he talked about he can shoot it. 3, of course, you probably can predict it. He's become a solid defender. And then 4, he said, to me, in very clear language, to be on my team, you have to be able to deliver in tough spots of the game. I walk away from that with very, very clear messages. And when I talk to young, emerging, or evolving basketball players, that's the message that I send them very, very, very clearly. Because you do see how it is possible to identify this subset of characteristics, these skills, and then therefore these drills that support the development of what's important to next level coaches. And this only serves, you guys, as a starting point. Because even though we tailor a regimen to what is important to high school and collegiate coaches, the process must still deliver well-rounded basketball players who can deliver on high-level production. There has to be a comprehensive skill set. Right? Otherwise, we've essentially wasted their time. I think coaches and trainers, I think I said this already, but coaches and trainers and players, they have to be able to prioritize these kinds of drills in their evolution, in their training sessions, if they're going to maximize the effectiveness of the process. Think of the fundamentals. I think of these basic skills that must be mastered before moving on to more advanced things. I think of building blocks. I think that they're essential if we're going to create a solid foundation of learning. I think that the difference between a player that has solid fundamentals and one without is it's like night and day. When a coach is sitting there talking to his team, a player that has solid fundamental hears one thing. All right, because the coach is going to be allowed to layer concepts and make the concepts more and more complicated to somebody that has solid foundation. But a player without fundamentals, they hear a totally different thing. To me, in modern basketball, I just can't imagine how coaches are building offensive and defensive strategies when the strategies call for solid fundamentals and then the children don't quite have them. I also think of social media here, and the popularity of social media and how different it was back in the 80s and the 90s. I think that for this particular group of youngsters, I think it's difficult to recognize that this notion of a significant portion of skill improvement comes really from focusing on a small amount of key things. I think social media offers viewers, number one, a lot of choices, a lot of basketball to choose from. How do they filter through it and make the right decisions? It's tough. It's tough for them. And then number two is the glitz and the glamour are the things that are in their face the most, right? The flashy movements. Those are the most popular. The problem is, I think, you guys, that those are the 80%. But it's difficult to find a real value because the glitz and glamour movements, they get all the likes. They're the ones that are in the algorithm at a high level. The 20% of the things that create consistent development, no, those are boring fundamentals, right? Those things never make it into the algorithm. They never show up on somebody's feed, right? But those are the true valuable things, right? I just think at the end of the day, I hope that coaches can coach themselves out of this rough spot where they're forced to play players that lack fundamentals just because there's not enough players that have them. And that may not change for a while. As long as there's unlimited amount of teams and competitions and tournaments, as long as they accommodate all of the levels of basketball, it might not be enough at stake for players to make certain that they have the level of fundamentals that they need. When I think of something being at stake, it makes me think of those guys that build those big skyscrapers in the big cities. Not home builders in the suburbs, but I'm talking about those structural iron and steel workers. Those are the guys that go to great heights assembling the metal, the framework, the bones of new buildings. I'm talking about the buildings that have the 110th floor, 111th floor, 112th floor. Let's step back a little bit and think about what would happen if they built the first 10 floors incorrectly and now they're way at the top, or they missed something, or something was dramatically out of code in those early floors. And these are codes that I'm sure they were asked to learn over and over and over again throughout the course of their career. Instead, like we're all human, those people were more interested in the glamorous things, the style and the design and the credit for the skyscrapers. But the guys at the top are at serious risk. And I'm willing to put danger aside for a second. The entire project is at risk. If we don't apply the special attention to fundamentals early on in the build, then the entire project is at stake. We can't get to the 125th floor goal of the project if somebody had early missteps in the process. I'm not saying that basketball needs to be this life or death thing, or that millions of dollars are at play, or in some cases it is. But with success percentages so low for potential players, we have to consider raising the stakes to a point where there's an incentive to prepare fundamentally at early ages. Again, we have to be able to build solid basketball players. The same way we have to be able to build tall buildings. If a player is just recreational, that's not Route 101, then this is not mandatory. But if they check the serious box in terms of their basketball goals, then they have to learn fundamentals before it's too late. I was having a conversation with a customer who coached a few players in travel basketball and thereby having a chance to impact them over the years. He said he was trying to tell them over the years to go and improve their games, get some fundamentals, but the families didn't listen. They enjoyed the twice a week practice, game on Saturday. And it wouldn't be a problem, again, because it's their choice whether or not they do it. But it does become a problem now that families are scrambling to make the junior varsity team or the varsity team. Because now, if we're being honest, we can draw a straight line to all that they have done or didn't do early on and the situation that they find themselves in now. They can't wait till a few months leading up to the tryouts to figure out how to get it done. Because now they've put a lot of stress and anxiety, all those things going into a tryout high school leads to a disaster. Because this coach, now they're trying to come to him for answers now. I just think those families didn't see the mission. They only saw the moment that they were standing in. I say this often to parents, this is a long-term process. It is not a microwave oven. If the goal is to become a great basketball player, especially if like most of us with this non-prototypical NBA size, this NBA athleticism and mentality, then they must endure the monotony of fundamental development. Again, I feel like fundamentals taught at an intense and an emotional level are mandatory weapons of this fight. I think that if we're honest, players and families, young and old, are skipping the boredom of fundamentals in order to get the far more exciting things that exist on the social media feed. In fact, they're plastered all over all of the social media, all of the internet space. Just like the skyscrapers, remember, if fundamentals don't exist, then the higher and higher they climb competitively, the risk increases of eventually they'll be exposed. They'll be exposed for having missed something in their development. And don't tell me they still have a chance to get it done, because it's tougher. The older you get, it's tougher to go back and grab those. Remember, they're boring. I think the best learners that children will ever be is when they're really, really, really young. So spend that time. You're not competing with anything. Spend that time to get it done. My sons and nephews are successful pro basketball players overseas. So I get a close-up look at overseas basketball players and also their commitment to fundamentals. I can't help but to think that basketball in this country would be at a whole different level if we took a page from the overseas book. I just think foreign players have us beat in this fashion. Guys like Luka Doncic and Nikola Jokic. I personally saw Victor, the long name Wembanyama. I watched him drafted from France a year ago. And, he went as the number one pick in the draft in Brooklyn. And don't act like last year opening night there wasn't 120 players from 40 different countries on NBA rosters, right? Each year they seem to break that record by bringing more and more people. Or don't act like this also. Don't act like that the USA didn't just struggle to a 3-3 record in the 2023 USA, the FIBA game, the FIBA World Cup, where they lost to Lithuania, Germany, and Canada. To me, we are the best basketball players in the world. I just wish we shot it and passed it better to go along with the athleticism, the toughness, and the innovation that we possess. I think what might get lost in Kyrie Irving's legendary ball handling is this fact that he shoots the ball really, really, really well. And he passes it like the greats. I'm afraid that young Americans might not see past the electrifying ball handling because they can relate to it. That's what's on social media. They can relate to the work associated to building a ball handle. I just think it's the reason why the international players have closed this performance gap. Remember, I was a part of the dream team. I was old enough. That was my time when we went over there and we were able to really impart our will on the world in basketball. But that performance gap has since closed. And the reason is because globalization, faces, social media, it was bound to happen. Now the problem is international players are starting to move like Americans with the ball. But they also add a lifetime of fundamentals onto it. Tough, intense fundamentals. They've been doing it all their lives. And now, the fundamentals are just used as a reference point while they look to advance their bag of skills. So they can get to a creative level, almost a better creative level than the USA basketball players. And that's the part of it that we have to be concerned about a little bit, is that now what the international players are doing looks beautiful, the results, right? This is what was designed for us. So we have to somehow get back to our fundamentals, get back to our roots so that we can begin to start to widen the gap again, all over again. The other day, I was in the gym and somebody asked a question. They said, should fundamental drills be monotonous? And I answered very clearly. People think that fundamental training doesn't have to always be monotonous. They have to think that if you just make it fun, if you make the training routine fun, then that will keep people engaged and it will be more effective. I tend to disagree. I disagree with it. I think that the fun changes the culture. And while monotony is not the goal when trying to access this repetition, trying to get to mastery, I think that it's not easily avoided. I think the further you get away from the bones of the fundamental work, I think the more you risk the effectiveness of the teaching moment. I think even if you create the most enjoyable drills, rotating through a variety of drills that target this same or similar fundamental skills, I think that even if you incorporate technology, I think the risk is still there. At the end of the day, these children have to be taught to fall in love with the monotony of it all. I think for fundamental success, it is the over and over and over again that wins. The success is in the emotion. The success is in the intensity. In closing, my son sent me a video, and I had to share this with you guys. He sent me a video of Alan Stein. He was a basketball trainer, spent time with a lot of big-time pros. He seems to have gone off into a life trainer, all right, a motivational guy who pretty solid in his reputation. He told a story one time, and I thought it was an amazing story of how we ought to think about this thing. He told a story of one time he had the good fortune of going to watch Kobe Bryant in an individual workout. This was around 2007, the height of Kobe Bryant's career. Kobe tells him to come on out at 4 o'clock in the morning. He gets there, and as a trainer, he had this perception of what this workout would look like. Because after all, Kobe's known for this impossible and grueling set of workouts historically. Alan Stein expected this complex, this dynamic set of drills that most people can't access. These aren't regular things. People don't have this kind of resource that Kobe does. So Kobe didn't disappoint with his effort and energy and passion. So he got after it, is the way Alan Stein describes, said Kobe really, really got after it. He said, however, what did surprise him was the simplicity of the drills and the movements. He said that it was stuff that he could imagine teaching elementary school children. So Kobe goes after this for hours, and afterward he goes to Kobe the next day and he asks, why is the best player in the world, why does he work out with such simple, basic drills and moves? Kobe tells him an answer that's in line with this 80-20 rule that we talked about in this podcast. He answered that, and I guess I'm going to paraphrase here, and I'll show you the video in a second, I'll be fair. But Kobe answers him and says, that's why I'm the best player in the world, because I never got bored with the basics. Here's some of the video.
I was actually shocked. For the first 45 minutes, I watched the best player in the world do the most basic footwork and offensive moves. Kobe was doing stuff that I had routinely taught to middle school age players. Now, this is Kobe Bryant we're talking about. This is the Black Mamba. So he was doing everything at an unparalleled level of effort and with unparalleled focus. And he was doing everything with surgical precision. But the actual stuff he was doing was very, very basic. Now, the whole workout lasted a couple hours. When it was over, again, I didn't say anything to him. I didn't say anything to his trainer. I just quietly left. But man, my curiosity got the best of me. I had to know. So later that day at camp, I went up to him again and said, Kobe, I don't understand. You're the best player in the world. Why are you doing such basic drills? And again, he was incredibly gracious and he smiled, but he said with all seriousness, why do you think I'm the best player in the world? Because I never get bored with the basics. I never get bored with the basics.
Now that's this 80-20 rule personified. I always get energy from hearing stories that are in line with that theory. Stories that help to further some of the discussions that we have, real life stories. Because Kobe is a great. And if it's good enough for him, then it's good enough for us and our families. That wraps up this episode. Again, hopefully you guys were able to gain some real value out of this discussion on Pareto and this 80-20 rule. I just think it is plausible that we walk away from this podcast understanding that it's a small number of training concepts that could have the biggest impact on a player's success. I just want to face it. Again, face reality, is that fundamentals are the things that your coaches are looking for. Fundamentals are the foundation by which all of the creative things that you're looking for as you develop, it's the foundation by which all of those things are built. I just think there's an overload of information, and somehow families have to sift through and find the thing that can move and balance their own families and their own basketball players in their own situations. I think I have to remind you that these are all doable things and that all the players have an opportunity for it. Before we wrap up, I just want to make sure that you guys like and subscribe the podcast. Again, by doing so, You guys will stay updated on the latest episodes. And again, my plan is to continue to explore. Each episode, I'd like to give you more and more information for you guys to be successful. Your support means the world to us. And again, I look forward to the next episode. Thank you.